Nathan Cole used to be the man gracing the covers of business magazines, stepping out of black-tinted luxury cars with a watch on his wrist worth more than most people's homes. But tonight, he wore a faded gray t-shirt, jeans with worn-out knees, and drove a borrowed 2008 Subaru from his assistant. In the back seat, his 5-year-old twin sons, Liam and Ben, were singing a chaotic melody about dinosaurs and toast. Nathan smiled, but inside, a quiet storm churned. He wasn't heading to a normal date. In truth, he hoped it wouldn't be a date at all. He just wanted to see if anyone could truly see him, not Nathan Cole, the tech billionaire CEO of Cole Technologies, but the man who lost his wife 3 years ago, the man who now ties tiny shoelaces and remembers every lullaby. He had tried dating again, but every time the look in their eyes changed the moment they realized what he owned: the homes, the money, the possibilities. He was tired. What he longed for wasn't admiration. It was peace. He chose a small neighborhood diner, no reservations, no paparazzi, no one who might recognize him. His dating profile picture was blurry on purpose. Maybe that's why the woman he was supposed to meet had sent him one final message earlier. "Sorry, I can't date a broke single dad. Good luck." Nathan didn't blame her, but his heart still sank a little reading those words. He glanced at his boys in the rearview mirror. "Spaghetti and an early night, yeah?" Liam nodded. Ben whistled the tune about the four-legged dragon. Normally, Nathan would have turned the car around. But tonight, for some reason he couldn't explain, he parked anyway. Maybe just to eat dinner with the two little boys who meant more to him than anything else in this world. The little diner only had a few occupied tables, and the air smelled of garlic butter and melting cheese. Nathan carefully lifted Liam and Ben from their car seats, slinging their tiny superhero backpacks over one shoulder. One arm cradling a kid, the other holding a box of crayons, he stepped into the restaurant. "You brought your kids on a date?" the hostess whispered, raising an eyebrow in mild surprise. "Not a date," Nathan smiled, steadying Liam as he bounced excitedly in his arms. "Just dinner." She looked him over, hesitated, then pointed to the window table. "You're lucky. Only one reservation with children tonight. Table 5. Nathan nodded, his heartbeat louder than any multi-million-dollar negotiation he'd ever faced. He helped the boys into their booster seats, handed Ben his plastic dinosaur, while Liam grabbed a red crayon. Within minutes, he was about to order takeout and leave. The woman from the app clearly wasn't coming. He had just reached for the diaper bag when the front door opened. A woman walked in, tote bag over her shoulder, a paperback in hand. She glanced around, squinting briefly at her phone. Then her eyes landed on table 5. She headed straight for him, wearing a nervous, genuine smile. "Sorry I'm late," she said, tucking a strand of wavy brown hair behind her ear. The bus was ridiculous. Nathan blinked. He opened his mouth to correct her. But then he really looked. She looked tired, not the kind worn by nightlife, but by life. And her eyes, they were kind, unpolished, sincere. "No worries," he said. "We just got here." "I'm Julia," she added. "You're John, right? The profile pic was blurry, but you said window seat with kids. I figured there couldn't be many dads here fitting that description." Liam stared at her intently. "Do you like robots?" Julia chuckled and nodded. "More than I like pizza." Ben handed her a crayon. "Draw one." And just like that, Julia began sketching. A wobbly robot with extra long arms and a glowing heart button. The boys giggled, pointing and poking at the napkin. In their eyes, she had already become a superhero. Nathan just sat there, stunned. There was no awkwardness, no probing questions about work, money, or status. Julia asked about Ben's favorite color. She listened to Liam's story about Rocket Rex, the invincible robot. And every now and then, she smiled at Nathan, not flirty, just sincerely. Dinner arrived in a whirlwind. Orange juice spilled, spaghetti launched like missiles. Julia didn't flinch. She laughed, told them about the time she dumped an entire bowl of soup on her head in a library when she was 5. When the server dropped the check mid-meal, Nathan tensed. He couldn't remember if there was even a wallet in these jeans. Julia noticed. She didn't ask. She didn't judge. She simply pulled out her wallet, slid a card to the waiter, and smiled. "It's fine," she said. "I've had worse dinner dates." Nathan turned to her, startled. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said softly, "but I wanted to. You looked like someone who needed a little kindness." 3 days had passed, but Julia hadn't left Nathan's mind for a moment. He didn't have her number, didn't know her last name. All he remembered was one small detail she'd said while wiping juice off her sleeve with a napkin. "I teach at the elementary school near the wooden bridge, the one with the red fence." On Saturday morning, Nathan packed a small bag of snacks, grabbed a few children's books, and buckled the boys into the back seat. He told himself it was just a casual stop by that school near the bridge. No expectations, no plans. But in his chest was a hope he couldn't explain away. The school appeared just as she described, red fencing and all. The playground echoed with laughter. A group of children sat cross-legged on the grass, listening to a woman in a soft beige cardigan who was reading aloud with dramatic flair. And then the fox looked around and asked, "Who took my apple pie?" Ben gasped. "That's her!" Liam clapped. "Miss Julia!" Before Nathan could stop them, the twins bolted forward, weaving between the other kids. Julia paused mid-sentence, startled as the two familiar faces appeared in front of her. Slowly, she looked up. Nathan stood across the field, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders tense. "5-minute break, everyone," Julia told the children gently. "Go get some water." The kids scattered. Julia rose to her feet, clutching the strap of her bag like it was the only solid thing keeping her steady. "You found me," she said, a half-smile tugging at her lips. "You mentioned the red fence," Nathan replied. A silence followed, not cold, just uncertain. Liam pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "I drew you another robot." Julia accepted it, her expression softening. "Thank you, sweetheart." Then her eyes returned to Nathan. "You weren't the man I was supposed to meet that night." "No," he admitted. "You were meeting someone else." Julia folded her arms. "So why did you stay?" Nathan exhaled. "Because you were the first person who didn't see me as a headline. You saw a man just trying to hold it together, a dad fumbling his way through dinner, and I couldn't walk away from that." Since that day at the schoolyard, Julia had started appearing in their lives more often, first as casual park run-ins, then quiet dinners that no one dared to call dates. Nathan never pushed, Julia never pried. They just moved gently towards something unspoken but unmistakable, as if both knew that the best things often come without labels. One evening, after a dinner of spaghetti and a spilled glass of milk, Liam looked up just as Julia rose to wash her hands. "Miss Julia?" "Yes, sweetheart?" Can I call you Mama Jules?" The room fell silent. Julia turned slowly, eyes glistening in an instant. She knelt beside him, gently brushing his hair back. "If that's what you want, then of course you can." Ben whispered, "You're the nicest person who's ever come to our house." Nathan stood nearby, hearing every word. His chest tightened, not out of fear, but from knowing that someone had stepped quietly into the most sacred part of their little world. Soon they began inviting her for dinner every weekend. Julia never brought gifts, never arrived late. She simply listened. When the boys drew wingless airplanes, she didn't laugh. She asked how they stayed in the air. When Nathan told stories of camping in the backyard to catch shooting stars, she laughed like it was the best thing she'd ever heard. Julia didn't try to fill a void. She didn't replace what had been lost. But with every gesture, every soft glance, she brought life back into their home, as if the walls could finally exhale again. One evening, after the boys had fallen asleep, Nathan and Julia sat on the porch, sipping hot tea and listening to the hum of summer insects. She looked at him, not with expectation, just presence. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. "I just know I care about those boys. And I like the way you look at them, like they're a miracle every day." "They are," Nathan replied, his voice rough. "I don't know if I deserve any of this, but I know I don't want to go back to being alone." Julia leaned her head on his shoulder, saying nothing, and he didn't need her to. Just her being there, beside him, quietly, completely, was the answer. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Julia took Liam and Ben for a stroll after their weekly visit to the public library. Each held an ice cream cone, giggling as Ben dropped his scoop onto the sidewalk and blamed evil gravity. They didn't know that, across the street behind a cluster of bushes, a camera lens was clicking furiously, capturing the moment Julia held their hands, head bowed slightly, sunlight catching her smile. The next day, the photo surfaced on a gossip site with the headline, "Mysterious Woman Spotted with CEO Nathan Cole's Sons. A New Love or Replacement?" Within hours, her name was everywhere. Internet sleuths tracked down her address, her school, even her mother's Facebook profile. Stories twisted into fiction. Julia was the mistress, the gold digger, the teacher who used kids to get close to a billionaire. The following day, her principal called her into the office. His face was tired, apologetic. "There's been pressure," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Some parents and one of our major donors, they're concerned. The media attention, it's disruptive." Julia clutched the strap of her canvas tote. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I know," he said softly, "but right and wrong don't matter to them. They just want quiet." That afternoon, Julia walked out of the school carrying a box of personal belongings. Some colleagues averted their eyes. One whispered behind her, "Years of quiet dedication erased by a single photo and 1,000 lies." That evening, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from unknown numbers, interview requests, intrusive questions. Of the dozens, only one she read more than once. "Julia, please talk to me. I had no idea this would happen." "Nathan." She didn't respond. The next morning, the chaos came to her doorstep. Dozens of reporters lined the sidewalk outside her small apartment. Neighbors stared. One woman shouted, "Is it true? Are you pregnant with his child?" Then came the sound of footsteps cutting through the noise. A tall figure stepped from a parked car. Wind tossed his hair as he walked toward the building. Nathan Cole, coat unbuttoned, exhaustion in his eyes, said nothing to the press. He looked only at her window. From behind the curtain on the second floor, Julia watched him, hands trembling against the fabric. "Julia," he called up, his voice steady but cracked at the edges. "I can't change the world, but I can stand in front of it with you." The street fell into stunned silence. "Let me stand with you," he continued. "Let me take the cameras, the questions, the noise. Just say the word." Inside, Julia sank to the floor, back against the door. "You have to protect the boys," she whispered. "Don't let them get caught in this." "They already are," he said. "They ask about you every night. They miss you, and so do I." "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know, but somehow this became the most real thing I've had in years." A long pause stretched between them. Cameras clicked. The wind blew gently. "I'm sorry," she said through the door, tears choking her words. "But you have to go." Nathan stood still for a beat, nodded quietly. Then he turned and walked away, step by step, surrounded by flashing lights and noise, but utterly alone. Julia sat on the floor, arms wrapped around the box of her belongings, tears falling silently. Still taped to her door was a crayon drawing. "We miss you, Miss Julia," written by Liam, a small orange handprint from Ben pressed into the corner. Her world, once quiet and small, had become something she no longer recognized. 3 days had passed, and Julia still hadn't taken down Liam's drawing from her door. Every time she stepped outside, her fingers brushed over the purple crayon letters and orange handprint like a silent promise from a world she no longer knew how to return to. The media frenzy had quieted. Headlines had moved on to the next scandal. But the damage lingered in pieces. Her job remained suspended. Her name still drifted through cached articles and gossip blogs. The small, peaceful life she once knew had become a silent void. At Nathan's home, things weren't much brighter. Laughter had been replaced by cautious questions. "Where's Miss Julia? Is she sad? Will she ever come back?" Nathan had no answers. Only one thing was clear. He had to do something, not to undo what happened, but to build something from what was left. On a quiet Sunday morning, he packed up the twins and drove back to Julia's apartment. No reporters this time. He parked 2 blocks away and carried the boys to her door. The old drawing was still there, fluttering gently in the breeze. This time, Liam held a new one. 3 stick figures, floating hearts above them, and the words scrawled unevenly. "We bring our hearts." Inside, Julia sat surrounded by books she kept rearranging just to stay sane. When she heard the knock, she froze. Then she heard it. A tiny voice. "Miss Julia?" She opened the door. There they were. 2 small boys, arms stretched wide, eyes filled with the same light they had when she read to them for the first time. She dropped to her knees, tears falling before she could say a word. "I missed you both so much." Nathan stood behind them, hands tucked into his coat pockets, eyes fixed on her as if afraid the moment might vanish if he blinked. "I didn't come with headlines," he said, "didn't come with promises, just brought my heart. And theirs." Julia rose slowly, still holding the boys. Why did you come?" "Because I can live without the money, the press, the noise, but not without this, not without you." She looked down. "I thought I had to leave to protect you all." "You were trying to protect us," he said gently. "But leaving isn't protection. It's separation." She lifted her gaze, quiet, and then opened the door wider. "Come in." In the days that followed, they didn't go back to the way things were. They began again, differently. Julia didn't move in. Nathan didn't ask her to return to teaching. They chose slowness. One afternoon, while the boys were building a Lego spaceship, Nathan asked quietly, "If you could do anything in the world, something that made you feel truly alive, what would it be?" Julia didn't hesitate long. "I'd start a reading program for underserved kids, the ones who stay in the library until closing time because they don't want to go home." Nathan nodded. "Then let's build that." They called it Story Bridge, a free mobile storytelling program that traveled to shelters, community centers, and low-income schools. Julia ran it. She picked the books, trained volunteers, and read aloud with the same warmth she'd given Liam and Ben that very first night. Nathan quietly funded everything. No press releases, no photos of him cutting ribbons. When reporters called, his team sent only facts: how many kids they'd reached, how many books had been shared. Gradually, the narrative shifted. From the mystery woman to the woman bringing books to forgotten corners. At night, Julia still lived in her cozy little apartment, where she felt most herself. But she also came to Nathan's home more and more, not out of obligation, but for something quieter and stronger: belonging. On a soft spring evening, the little wooden cottage behind town echoed with the laughter of children. Nathan stood at the stove in an apron that read, "Dad the Chef," while Julia wiped tomato sauce from Liam's fingers with a fraying kitchen towel. Ben sat on the floor, counting noodles stuck to his shirt like it was the highlight of his day. Nothing was perfect, but everyone was present, and for Julia, that was enough. After dinner, the boys disappeared into the bedroom, then returned with hushed giggles and a small box wrapped in napkins. Julia raised an eyebrow, laughing. "What is this?" "A surprise," Ben shouted. "Open it slow," Liam warned. "It's delicate." Julia peeled the napkin wrapping carefully, treating it like it held something sacred. Inside was a ring, made of string and mismatched plastic beads. The twist was uneven, the beads out of place, but it shimmered under the kitchen light in a way only true love could. "We made it," Liam explained, "with old shoelaces and those beads from my pencil case." "And Daddy's hair glue," Ben added. Nathan dropped to one knee beside her. His expression was more serious than during any boardroom speech he'd ever given. "I used to think I'd only be loved for what I had. My name, the money, the noise," he began. "But then came a wrong table, 2 little boys, and a woman who looked past all of it, and saw me." He took her hand, eyes locked with hers. "I'm not offering a title or a grand ceremony. Just this. Be you with us. Be the heart of this home." He paused, breathed. "Julia Reyes, will you be my partner in life?" Julia looked at the ring in her palm, then at the boys holding their breath, bouncing on their toes. She laughed through tears, slipping the ring onto her finger. "We've been a family for a while now," she said. "You're just the last to catch up." Liam and Ben screamed with joy, wrapping their arms around both of them. No cameras, no headlines, just the soft porch light glowing above, giggles tangled in warm hands, and a small, imperfect ring, crafted from love. That night, with the boys cheering and crayon ring on her finger, Julia said yes, to love, to belonging, to the life they'd built slowly. But Nathan knew there was one more promise to make, not with plastic beads, but with vows. He just had to wait for the perfect moment. 1 year later, much had changed, and yet the most important things had stayed the same. Julia still lived in her small apartment above the corner bakery. She'd returned to teaching, not out of necessity, but because she missed the spark in a child's eye when they heard their name spoken during story time. Her name no longer appeared in headlines. Instead, the one people spoke of now was Storybridge, the mobile storytelling project that had reached thousands of children across the city. She was no longer the CEO's mystery woman. She was simply Julia. And that was enough. Nathan never asked her to move into the estate. He knew she didn't need marble floors. She needed roots, the kind built with presence, not possessions. They spent most of their time at the old wooden cottage, where it had all begun. The wind chimes his mother hung a decade ago still rang in the breeze. The tiny kitchen still bore the pirate maps Liam and Ben had drawn in marker on the refrigerator. One afternoon, Julia stepped out onto the porch and paused. There it was, the dinner table from the night they first met, remade by Nathan himself. Worn wood, mismatched chairs, the same lovable imperfections. "You brought back the wrong table," she teased. Nathan grinned. "Some mistakes are worth keeping." That day they had a backyard picnic. No silverware, no champagne, just sandwiches, lemonade, and 2 boys running barefoot through sunlight. After lunch, Liam and Ben disappeared again, returning with a tiny music box. "Miss Julia," Liam said, "we wrote you a poem." Julia read the scribbled lines, then looked at the boys who waited with wide, hopeful eyes. She nodded, pulling them into a hug. "I don't need anything more," she whispered. "I already have everything." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Julia and Nathan sat on the porch swing, fingers interlaced, the breeze rustling above them. "I used to think I could never love again," Nathan said softly, "that doing so would be a betrayal. But then I realized," he glanced at her, Loving you isn't replacing. Loving you is a completely new chapter." Julia leaned against his shoulder. "And we chose it," she replied. "Not out of need, but because we believed." And in the gentle quiet of an ordinary day, nothing grand or loud, a family was finally complete, not by what they owned, but by who they chose to love. On a bright sunny morning, Liam and Ben tugged at Julia's hand, faces glowing with secret excitement. "Where are we going, boys?" she laughed, brushing cookie crumbs off her fingers. "It's a surprise," Liam whispered. "A really big one," Ben nodded, gripping her hand tightly. They led her down the winding path behind the cottage, past the trees, to an open meadow where wildflowers danced in the breeze. A picnic blanket was already laid out, with a basket of pastries and a pitcher of lemonade waiting in the sun. The air smelled of fresh grass and faraway wind chimes. Julia turned, ready to ask what was happening, and then saw Nathan standing in the center of the field, holding a small bouquet of daisies, the kind she once said, "look like they're always smiling." He walked toward her, eyes never leaving hers. "I know we chose each other a long time ago," he began, voice just above a whisper. "Not through ceremony, not through promises, but through every dinner, every stained shirt, every time you listened without expecting anything in return." He knelt down in the grass. "But today, with the two most important witnesses, the ones who brought us together, I want to ask this the proper way." Julia's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes welled. "Julia Reyes, will you marry me? Be my partner, their mother, my friend, the light of this home?" She nodded, tears falling freely, and embraced him as the boys cheered and clapped around them. They married under the old oak tree behind the cottage. Just a few loved ones. Children from Storybridge were the flower girls and ring bearers. Liam, in his tiny suit, held the rings with solemn pride. Ben read a speech made entirely of rhyming nonsense he'd written himself. There was no designer gown. Just Julia in a simple white dress she'd tailored from her mother's old wedding gown, a thread of memory stitched into every seam. Nathan wore a rolled-up shirt, his hair tousled from the wind. And in the way they looked at each other, it was more beautiful than any castle or choir. A year later, the house echoed with a new sound, the soft cries of a baby girl with curls like her mother and bright eyes that mirrored them both. They named her Hope. Hope didn't change the world, but she made theirs feel whole. Julia sang lullabies that once comforted Liam and Ben. Nathan kept a rocking chair beside the crib where he'd sit in silence, watching his three favorite people sleep. A family, not because they were perfect, but because they chose each other day after day through all the noise and all the stillness. And sometimes Julia would look at Nathan and whisper, "I'm so glad you sat at the wrong table that night." And Nathan would smile and pull her close. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin not with perfect timing, but with a wrong table, a spilled juice, two wide-eyed boys, and one soul brave enough to stay when no one else would.